Good afternoon, everybody. The time is now 11:25 in the morning, and we are about to start our AirWatch webinar in about 5 minutes. I see there are about 5 people watching right now. If you could do me a favor and you hear my voice right now, please do me a favor. Go ahead and in the chat, state your name and the school in which you are a part of so that we can actually take an attendance for this webinar. So if you can just go ahead in the chat, just let us know who you are, say hi, and that'd be great. And then we'll be starting in about 4 minutes. Hello, Kyungo. How are you doing? So we have about 20 people that are registered for today's session. I see 5 right now, so I'm gonna give them. I'm gonna start right at 11:30 just to be cognizant of your time. The beginning is just kind of a lot of fluff, so it's not like you're gonna miss on how to manage AirWatch, but it does kind of go over like the benefits and what the intention of today's webinar is. So it's not pertinent to be there for the beginning, so I'm gonna get started right at 11:30 just to be good on time. One thing to note is I apologize ahead of time is that there's apparently a lot of people in our building today doing an in-session. I believe all the LC1 principals are here, so they are kind of bogging down our network. But so far it seems to be good. So if you guys notice any quality drop or you can't hear me, please do let me know. And hello, Dorothy. Hello, Michelle. And hello, Eric Williams from Dovercourt. Hey, he's in your neighborhood. Aren't you in the Dovercourt area? Yeah. Yeah. Hello, Portia. Good morning. Going to begin this in about 1 more minute. All right, 11:30. Let's kick this off right at the beginning. So, welcome everybody. Thank you for attending today's AirWatch webinar. We do appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to learn about this. AirWatch is our new mobile device management system, basically, that we're using to manage all of our mobile devices. More related to iPads at this moment. iPads are one of the most common mobile devices that we have. So this product really helps us as far as managing iPads go. It is kind of mandatory and it is board wide. So this is a new initiative and that's why we're doing this webinar is to teach you guys how to use AirWatch to better manage the iPads in your school. And hopefully once we get over this initial hurdle of, what is AirWatch? How do I get started? It'll make your lives a lot easier going forward. It definitely makes our lives a lot easier too. to have all your mobile devices communicating basically with a central system that we can then tell them, how to look and feel in different restrictions. So just keep in mind, though, as we go through this webinar that it is good for you guys to manage AirWatch by yourself, but if at any moment you are confused, you can always contact us at the client service desk, or you can say, I want my iPads to be configured this way or that way, and we can try to offload some of those tasks from you guys and to us. But this will give you a good understanding of what the system is and how you can manage it yourself. And with that, let's get right into it. Oh, and hello, Amesbury Media. I assume you're from Amesbury. Okay, so let's kick this off. Oops, my mouse is on the wrong screen. All right, before we begin, I just want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and it will be available at the end of the webinar using the same YouTube link that you're using right now. So if you actually were to look through this channel that you're watching right now, you would see that we have all of our previous webinars recorded here, and you can kind of go back and see, what it is that we talked about if you ever need to come back and reference it. So the webinar is recorded. It's going to be available. Same link you got right here. There is also about a 10-second delay between the moment I'm saying something and the moment that you actually hear it, just because of the nature of streaming. So if you ask a question in the chat and I don't get to it right away, that's probably why. So just give me a few seconds and I'll respond to that. And of course, do feel free to ask questions in the chat. I have my colleague here who is actually also watching the chat. So if I miss something or if he can answer it quickly, he'll do so in the chat. As well as if there are questions that require more detailed response, I'm going to ask to park those till the end of the webinar, just because I want people to get back to class. I don't want to take up more of your time than I need to. And of course, you can always go back and watch the video again where I'll answer that question, and I can at least at the end of the webinar go more in depth without impeding everyone else's time. So before we begin, just to note, I'm pretty sure you guys are all familiar with how the YouTube interface works, but in the bottom right hand corner there's a little gear icon where you can adjust the quality. 1080p and 720p will probably be recommended. They are the highest quality, so you'll be able to read things on the screen better. But of course, if your network does not allow so, you can go ahead and leave it on auto, and then that way it will automatically choose the best resolution. Also, next to the volume control button is a live button. If you see that the live button is gray, it means that the video is not as live as possible, we'll say. So what you want to do is you want to click the actual wording where it says live and see if it shows red. So if it's red, then that means it's as live as possible. It's not falling back out of sync. So AirWatch, what is it? You guys are probably all familiar with what it is right by now, having come this far. AirWatch is basically a mobile device management system or enterprise mobility management system. The terms are interchangeable. The idea is basically that all our devices are talking to one service, and that service is AirWatch. And AirWatch will tell the iPads how to look, feel, and behave. And basically, it's a centralized portal where we can configure and manage all of our iPads and mobile devices, Android as well. So what are the benefits and why did we employ this, or rather, why did we deploy this? Right now, we have automatic TDSB wireless network access. So prior to AirWatch, all of our iPads had to join TDSB-Wi-Fi, which requires your username and password, which is not good because, obviously if you're a teacher and you sign into the Wi-Fi with your employee number and password, and then, it's almost like you're held accountable for everything that happens on that iPad going forward. We don't want that to be the case, as well as passwords expire. So if your password expires, suddenly it falls off the Wi-Fi. With AirWatch, they joined the WLAN TDSB01, which is our production wireless network. And when they're joining the production wireless network, they don't require a username and password, and they should stay connected going forward, assuming you don't try to change it. There's also easy app installation. Easy is HiChem. Easy is a relative term. It's easy in that once you have it all set up the way you like, going forward, it'll be easier to push out apps. There's also remote wireless configuration and update, so that's how everything sort of works with AirWatch, is that we configure it from AirWatch and push it out to the iPads. It also removes the requirement for an Apple ID. So prior to AirWatch, let's say you wanted to get an app, you would go to the App Store, you would search up the app, find the app that you want, download it, and then you had to sign in with an Apple ID in order to download that app. And we gave Apple IDs to all the schools, and then they caused problems because you would forget the Apple ID, or a student would sign in with their Apple ID on the iPad. And it was just a nightmare. So no longer do we need the Apple IDs. All the apps are going to push out from AirWatch, and also you won't have to go up to each individual iPad and do that when you deploy an app. You can just push it out to, like, let's say 30 iPads at a given time, which I'll demonstrate during this webinar. There's also a consistent experience between the iPads. So right now our iPads, if they're an AirWatch, you'll notice that they have a blue background with the TDSB logo. So here's an iPad that I have with me. You can see the background is a TDSB blue, we'll call it. And on the lock screen, which is right here, yep, there we go. So you'll see that we have the TDSB 20th anniversary logo. So these iPads all have the same look and feel. If you pick up an iPad and you see that it's got that logo, you know it's already in AirWatch. Where was I? Let me switch back. Okay, so there's also built-in security policies preventing students from adding and removing apps. So if you pick up an AirWatch iPad, what'll happen is you'll notice it's a little bit restricted. I'm going to touch on that in just a second. So actually, I'll just know that there's built-in security policies, and I'm going to talk about that in a few seconds. And then lastly, of course, there's a school-level inventory of your iPads. So when you're looking at AirWatch, you can actually see in a list all the iPads you have, you know, what kind of hardware it is, the battery life, what version it's running. Basically, it's just like a centralized, you know, inventory or web portal of your iPads. So that it helps in that sense too, to audit your own iPads of how many you have and maybe expanding more in the future. Who can log into AirWatch? I'm hoping that all of you can log into AirWatch right now. We did check all of the attendees for today's webinar and tried to verify that you guys all had access to AirWatch. So you should be able to log into AirWatch. By default, though, principals have access to log into AirWatch, and then the principal could then add you, the teachers, into the AirWatch system through the LAS portal. We did send the instructions out to all the principals that for you guys to be added in. Most of you are already in. I think there was about 2 or 3 that weren't, and then we requested that you guys get expedited to be added in before today. So you should all have access. Of course, we'll see what happens when it comes time to log in and where you guys are at with that. If you guys want to add a new AirWatch administrator, the principal does that again through LAS, and then they add you in through LAS. But from the moment that they add you in through LAS, it can take 12 to 24 hours for you to actually have access to the console. So that's just something to be aware of. Now, this demo is going to cover the iPad's new look and feel. You kind of briefly saw that. We're going to show you how to navigate the AirWatch web console, and we're going to show you how to organize your iPads into groups. And the reason we do this is so that you can more intuitively manage your iPads. So you can have, you know, your iPads, your grade 1 iPads in the grade 1 group, your grade 2 iPads in the grade 2 group, your robotics iPads in the robotics group. Something like that, something that's meaningful to you. So that way you don't necessarily have all your apps on all your iPads. They're logical, and they make sense to how you guys have it at your school. And of course, we're going to show you to add and remove the apps to those groups. So once they're grouped, then you can push the app to the groups. So we're going to show you how to do that. And time permitting, I'm going to show you how to do web clip. It's the same idea as an app. You can push it to all the devices, but instead of like an app, what you do is you basically push out like a web shortcut. So I could push out a shortcut to, let's say, your school's website to all the iPads. It'll look like an app in that it'll have an icon and a name, but that is something you can do with AirWatch, and I'm hoping that we can show that time permitting. So now I'm going to dive over to the device side of things. So you briefly saw the iPad. 2 things I want to focus on are the agent and the catalog. These are the 2 indicators that your iPad is currently in AirWatch. So let me toggle over here. So with me, I have a TDSB iPad enrolled into AirWatch. As I showed you before, when I first unlock the device, you'll see that it has the time and the TDSB logo. We can unlock the iPad by pressing the home button. And then, of course, we have our agent and our catalog app.
The new feature of the serial number at the home screen.
We have that?
Yeah, so if you lock it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is a cool new feature, by the way. I didn't know about this. But from the screen of the iPad, this is something to show you right now, is we actually put in the serial number of the iPad in very, very small writing. And this will actually, let me see if I can get it. It's all blurry. Come on, focus. You can't see it, but it kinda. So anyways, we put the serial number on the lock screen in very small writing down here at the bottom. And the reason for that is if you ever have any problems with the iPad, you can always call us, and then you can read out that serial number, because some iPads, they don't have the serial number on the back. We have ours labeled here, and in very, very small writing underneath where it says iPad, that's even smaller than what we had before, is the serial number of the iPad. It's upside down, but I don't think that's going to show up on our document camera, but it's super tiny. And then even older models, actually, I don't believe they even had the serial number. I mean, actually, that one has it too. I've seen some iPads where they don't have the serial number, or maybe they get rubbed off, and it makes, when you call us with a question, or you say, what's going on with this iPad, we need that serial number so that we can uniquely identify it. So we did put it here at the lock screen, very small writing down here at the bottom. Just one thing I wanted to show you. But getting back into the actual iPad itself, one of the things you'll notice about an AirWatch iPad, despite the fact that it has that blue background and that TDSB logo at the lock screen, is the two apps I was referring to are the Agent and the Catalog. So they're right here. In the top left-hand corner right here with the blue shield is the Agent, and on the right is the Catalog. The Agent app is the brains of AirWatch. That app is what makes it enrolled in AirWatch, and that's what allows it to communicate with AirWatch. The Catalog app is where we can put apps, or rather list a bunch of apps that you can download manually on the iPad. So if you launch the Catalog, it'll basically show you all the apps you've either forced to the iPad or apps that you can optionally deploy to the iPad. I'll get more into the Catalog later, but the idea here is that it's basically a list of the apps that are supposed to be installed on the iPad, as well as apps that you have configured to be optional for the iPad. So I could say, for example, looking at this catalog, that Twitter, it's not mandatory to be on all the iPads. I didn't force it to all the iPads, but I'm giving me, the end user, the option to press that install button and then install Twitter. That's the idea behind the catalog. So I will go into that a little bit later, though, in more detail. We'll show you how to deploy it that way. But the Agent is the more important part, this Agent app here. And the reason I like to talk about the Agent app is because one of the first things you'll notice about an AirWatch iPad is that there's no app store. And this is what causes a lot of frustration for people, especially if you've just gotten started with AirWatch. You're probably going to pick up your iPad, and it's like, well, I need an app now. I don't know anything about AirWatch at this moment. How do I get an app on here? If at any moment you're frustrated with AirWatch, and you'll notice that your iPads are locked down. So, and the reason for that is these iPads will consider them having two modes, one being student mode and one being teacher mode, we'll say. So right now, this iPad is in, we'll say, student mode, in that there's no app store. And the idea here is that if I'm a student and I'm holding this iPad, I can't just go to the app store and download, whatever games I want or anything like that. So the app store is actually not available to use. Also, there's some more settings that are locked down. If I go into settings here, there are some things that cannot be changed as a student or in this current state, such as a passcode. There used to be an option here on the left-hand side to put a passcode on the device. And that would mean, you have to enter in that 4-digit code before you open up the iPad. And students, what they would do is they would actually pick up the iPad, set a passcode on it, and then not tell the teacher. And then, well, you have to wipe the device because you can't break that passcode. There's the wallpaper they can't touch. A lot of different restrictions on the iPad. In fact, you can see the restrictions on the iPad. Maybe I won't show that just so I can go later. But you can actually see a list of all the restrictions that take effect on the iPad. What's that? No, that's to turn on the restrictions passcode. But if you go under profiles and stuff like that, where is it? Device management, device manager, and restrictions. So here's a list of all the restrictions that are actually on the iPad right now in its current state. So I'm not going to read them all, but the news is not allowed. Wallpaper modification not allowed. Changing app cellular data usage not allowed. Siri while locked not allowed. Game Center not allowed. It's got a list of everything that right now the students are not allowed to do. And these are all things that are currently in effect right now on this iPad. I can't do any of the stuff that was listed there. However, if at any moment you wish to circumvent that, you're a teacher, you don't need to be told what you can and can't do. You can launch the Agent app down here, or rather, sorry, over here. So the blue Agent app, you can launch it either way. But if you launch the Agent app, what will happen is it'll prompt you for your employee number and password, or rather your username and password. And if in here I enter in my employee number and password, what will happen is it will automatically unlock all the AirWatch restrictions. I'm just going to pull this iPad off the screen so I don't type in my password. Give me 2 seconds. I also have the longest password in the board, I'm pretty sure. Okay. Hopefully I didn't get a typo there. So there it is. So what I have now is I launched the Agent app, that blue shield, and I typed in my employee number and password. And I'm going to click Login, and what will happen is it'll load. And then once it's done loading, it'll show me a screen with all the details surrounding the iPad. I got the success, so my login worked. That's great. It's going to say loading, and then it's going to show me some extraneous data about the iPad. Uh, Nothing else needs to be done here. I've logged in. That's all I need to do here in the agent app. But just that act of logging in here, what that's done is that's actually removed all the restrictions on the device. So now, if I press the home button and go back to my screen here, look at that. The App Store is available. The App Store is right there. And in fact, if I go to settings, all these restrictions that were in place before are now removed. So if I look on the left-hand side, I can now change the wallpaper of the iPad. I can now put a passcode on the device. I can sign in with an iTunes Apple ID. So now that I've signed into the AirWatch agent, there are 0 restrictions on this iPad. This is no different than if you went to the Apple Store and bought your own iPad. All restrictions are removed. You can do whatever you want to this iPad. Very important to know, if you ever get frustrated with AirWatch, that's one thing you can do if you need an app immediately, let's say. So let's say tomorrow you have a session or something, or somebody coming in, and you have an urgent need for an app, and for some reason, you don't have it in AirWatch because we didn't do it through the app request form, which we'll talk about later. But if you don't have the app available to you for AirWatch, or you can't get a hold of your AirWatch administrator to push out that app to your iPads, this is your fail-safe. This is your way around that. So now the App Store is available, and then you can go add the app the old-fashioned way. You launch the App Store, find the app you want. Let's say it's this Emoji Me Face Maker, and then you can sign in with the school Apple ID as you had before, and then you would download it. So that's the agent app, and of course, before I hand this back to a student, because right now it's in that teacher mode. You don't want students to be able to go to the App Store and change the settings. So before I hand it back to a student, we go back into the agent app here, top left-hand corner. And then you can see it's still logged in, but there's a log out button down here at the bottom. I don't know if you can see that. If I tap the log out, it'll say, "Are you sure?" I click yes, and it's going to log out. Once I'm back at the login screen, I'll know that it's that teacher mode is turned off. So now I'm back at the login screen. When I press the home button, you can see once again the App Store is gone, and the settings have been trimmed down to things I can't do anymore. So all those restrictions are back in place. So you turn it on and turn it off. You got to do something, you turn it off, and then you hand it back to a student, you turn the restrictions back on by signing out of the AirWatch agent. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't make any sense, or you still have some questions about that, feel free to ask me in the chat, because I am moving on. That was the device side of things. I will periodically go back and forth between my display here and the iPad when I'm showing you deployment and stuff like that. So now that we've looked at the device and we know about the AirWatch agent and how to sign in and sign out and all the different restrictions, now let's go back to the web console. This is where the actual magic happens of making apps make their way over to all of our iPads. When you're logging into the AirWatch web console, you can log in from anywhere on the web. It doesn't have to be just within the TDSB. There's no browser limitation. You should be able to use any browser, Internet Explorer, Firefox, Google Chrome, whichever one you prefer. And there is a specific way we need to enter in our username when we're logging into this AirWatch console, which I'm going to show you in just a minute when we go to log in. And also, when we first log in, it's going to ask us to create a 4-digit PIN code. Do not worry too much about that PIN code. That PIN code is only used when you go to wipe a device. So let's say you wanted to wipe a device in AirWatch, and when I say wipe, I mean, change it back to factory settings. If you wanted to make a device go back to its factory settings, no apps, vanilla, what will happen is it'll ask you for this 4-digit PIN code. You can change it at any time. We can help you with that. Don't worry too much about the 4-digit PIN code, but it will ask you to create that when we first log in. And the link for AirWatch is listed right here. Obviously, that is a mouthful, and you're not going to remember that. So here's the way how we log in. I'm going to exit out of this PowerPoint presentation, and let me just minimize that. So here's your standard TDSB desktop, Windows 10. In your school shared folder, right now I have a folder called LAS Test School. Obviously, that is not the name of a school, but for you, what you'll see is your school name on the desktop as a folder. So for example, Nicole is from Bryan Public School. So on her desktop, she'll see a Bryan Public School folder. And that's basically where you go to, access the teacher share, the student drop-off folders, yearbook folders, all that good stuff. So what we did to make it easier to access AirWatch is in your school shared folder, there is the hyperlink for AirWatch there. And that's how you can launch AirWatch rather than trying to memorize, cn239.awmdm.com/, just use the shortcut in the desktop. So once we find that shortcut, we can double click that. It will open up with your default browser, and then we'll be on the AirWatch login screen. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here because I want to show you what I was referring to about the username, just so it makes it a little bit more clear here. Okay, so if you're following with me and you're already this far, you probably have the AirWatch console open on your end. And now we're going to go ahead and log in. And this is usually where people start saying in the chat, hey, I can't log in. And then that's usually a good indicator that we have missed some permissions. But nonetheless, let's dive in. So we're going to log in here using our employee number and password. But before we put in our employee number in the username field, we actually have to type in a very important prefix. If you do not do it, you will not be able to log in. You need to type in TDSB backslash. Okay? The TDSB doesn't have to be capital like I have here. You can make it, TDSB backslash, or you can have TDSB backslash. It doesn't matter as long as you have TDSB backslash. And again, the backslash is the key directly above the enter key, not the one to the left of the shift key. The one to the left of the shift key, that's the forward slash, and then the one to above the enter key is the backslash. So we're going to use TDSB backslash above the enter key, and then our employee number. Okay, and then in the password field, we just use our standard network password, the same one that expires every 90 days. But you go ahead and type that in there, and once we're ready to log in, we will press the login button. Now I zoomed in here just so you can better see what I was referring to with the username, so I'm just going to zoom back out now that I think you guys get the picture. Boom, there we go. So TDSB backslash employee number, current network password, click login. For me, it's going to jump right into the dashboard, which kind of just gives me a bunch of graphs. For you, if this is the first time you're logging in, what you're probably going to see is just the acceptance of the terms of agreement, like that. Just click accept to that. And then, of course, creating the 4-digit PIN code. Once again, make it something easy. Don't make it your bank card or anything like that, or worry too much about it. You can even set it as 1, 2, 3, 4. The reason this PIN code is only used to make sure that you don't wipe a device accidentally. So before you go to wipe a device, it basically says, are you sure? If you're sure, enter in your 4-digit PIN code. So for me, I set it to 1, 2, 3, 4, and I can share that with you because there's no consequence to that. If I go to wipe a device, it'll say, hey, before you wipe this device, please enter in the 4-digit PIN code. I enter 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it knows for sure that that's something I wanted to do, and then it wipes the device. So if you got it, just set it to something easy and move on. And then, of course, you'll be greeted with the dashboard. So let me toggle back here. I don't think we need the PowerPoint anymore at this point, because now it's all hands-on. So once you logged in and you accepted the terms of agreement and you created that 4-digit PIN code, 1, 2, 3, 4, why not? You'll now be on the dashboard. And the dashboard here is basically just a graphical overview of your environment. There's not much to be seen here other than for statistics about the makeup of your environment. In this case, for example, it says total deployment, I have 8. So that means I have 8 devices in my AirWatch environment. And breaks it down even further, like how many of them don't have a passcode, when was the last time they were seen, as in reported online, and the different platforms. In this case, they're all Apple iOS, which means they're iPads. I don't have any Android devices. If you do have Android devices enrolled in AirWatch, you'll see that you have some Android devices as well. In this case, I don't. But basically, just a graphical overview of your environment. And all the charts are interactive. So if I hover my mouse over it and click it, it'll take me to what statistic it's referring to. So for example, it says, there's 6 devices that were last seen in the previous 8 hours. So it's going to show me, if I click this, it's going to take me to the list of devices that were last seen in the previous 8 hours. So it kind of filters down my list. But let me go back and let me cancel this filter because this is the first time you're seeing that. So we're back at the dashboard, right? So that's basically the graphical overview. You don't need to spend too much time here. But now we're going to toggle over to list view right here. And you just kind of briefly saw list view when I clicked the graph. If I go to list view, it's going to take all my iPads and list them out. So here's where I can actually see all my iPads in my AirWatch environment. Right now, I already have my iPads named. I gave them names like robotics iPad, grade 4 iPad number 1, library iPad number 2, etc., etc. And that Nicole. Give me 1 second. Let me answer that. So basically, I have all my iPads listed here with a name. And so for you, if you're signing in and you either see iPads or don't see iPads, if you see them, they're probably going to have the default name of just iPad, which is why we're going to rename them. And I'll show you how to do that and why that's important in just a second. Nicole, it says here you have reset one of your iPads with AirWatch. It has the agent and the catalog, but it's not in the list of your devices. So the reason for that is AirWatch is board wide. In fact, if you, Nicole, type out that serial number in the chat, I'll actually show you where it is. But this will kind of help you understand how AirWatch works. Right now I switched over to a different role, so don't worry about that. But basically I have the ability to see the entirety of the TDSB AirWatch environment. So you can see on my screen now that total deployment dashboard shows 32,000 iPads. So that's how many iPads we have right now in AirWatch, 32,300 iPads across the board. If, for example, Nicole is part of Bryan Public School, if I look at this list here, I can see all the schools, and Bryan Public School basically has like its own folder. So all of the iPads that show up for you have to be in your group. So if I look for Bryan Public School, I missed it. Bryan. There we go. So here's Bryan Public School. And when I'm looking at Bryan Public School, in order for those iPads to get here, during the initial setup or the enrollment, it asks you to enter in an enrollment ID. I don't have an iPad here that's wiped. Actually, maybe I can show this one. Can you sign in and wipe that one? Thank you. So here's all of Bryan Public School's iPads. If you don't see it here, the reason is that during the initial setup of the iPad, one of the things it asks you is for a username and password. And a lot of people, what they do is they enter in their employee number and password, not knowing that they need to enter in their 4-digit Trillium number. When you enter in your, that's fine, Nicole. When you enter in your school's, your employee number and password, what happens is they go into a catch-all group here. So instead of being all the way down in schools, let me show you. Schools and then B and then Bryan Public School or whatever down here, what we do is if you type in your employee number and password at that step, it puts it right at the root here at TDSB Prod, and it's like a catch-all group. So it means if you didn't enroll it properly, it's sitting in like a free agent state. And in fact, Nicole, you'll probably notice on that iPad, there's no restrictions on it either. So the App Store is probably available. And the reason is because we wanted, if somebody were to enroll it incorrectly, we would rather the iPad not be restricted than to be restricted. So in the case of that iPad, Nicole, if you were to give me the serial number, I could move it over to your group. Okay, so you would then see that iPad appear in your group. I could take it from where it is and move it over into your little folder here, or your folder in AirWatch. Well, I call it a folder because it makes more sense that way, right? The other option is if you don't want to provide it to the help desk to move it over for you, you can actually just re-enroll the device, which I'm hoping I'll be able to show you that step that I was referring to. Right now I have an iPad that's wiping. So you basically have to wipe that iPad back to its factory settings and then go through the setup again and punch in that correct number. So let me switch back to my webinar environment. So my fake school called Maple Grove. So you're in here, we go to the list view again, and we see a list of our iPads. Now Nicole doesn't see one of her iPads that she has in her hands because it's not in her folder, as you saw earlier. And the reason is because during the initial setup, they may have accidentally typed in either an incorrect Trillium number or a incorrect, or maybe even like their employee number and password. Yeah, I mean, I can't really say much more other than unless I got that serial number. So if you provided the serial number, I'd definitely be able to look into that for you. So here's my iPads right now, and if your iPads are listed here and they all have the name of just iPad, we're going to want to rename them, and we can rename them from here. And the reason we want to rename them is so that when you do come into AirWatch, if you look at how I have mine laid out, is that they all make sense. So the iPad, for example, that would be used in the library is called Library iPad number 2. You probably have your own labeling convention at your school. I'm hoping you guys do. If you do not, I would totally recommend that you guys label them. So on the back of the iPad, maybe number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or come up with your own convention. I can't really tell you guys how you're gonna, manage your iPads at your school as far as like physically distributing them. But try to name them so that they have a purpose followed by a unique number, so that way when you're looking at your list, you'll know, the iPad that you have in your hand is the iPad that you see in front of you.
If you search Nicole's name in the file, it comes up.
Oh, there's an iPad. Yeah.
So it shows there's
Okay.
a registered.
All right, let me just real quick. I'm gonna toggle back over, and I want to show Nicole's iPad that was in the wrong place. So Nicole, Betty, like that. So during the setup, so we have an iPad here. So this is actually the iPad that you have, Nicole, that's currently not in your environment. And I'm gonna actually bring it up here and show you. So you can see that the organization group is listed as TDSB Prod. Like I said, you don't see this stuff because it's invisible to you. Because if we go back to that tree, you're deep in there. You're under schools, and then B, and then what was it? Bryan Public School? Bryan? Was it Bryan or Birch? Hi, Marilyn. Anyways, you're in what?
It's Brian.
It's Bryan. Okay. So if we look here, your school is right here, right? So we need to take this iPad that's sitting at the root and move it into Bryan, which let me do that for you now. And let me just do that. I'm going to change the organization group. You can all ignore this, but it is good to know that how this thing is structured, so that when you come across this, you'll know why that is. So why is that not working? Schools? A to B. Bryan? I hope that worked. I don't think that moved over. Yeah, no. Let me try that one more time. Just made a channel so I could ask a question. Just have a few minutes to participate. So if you can answer while I'm here, I'll connect with the CSD. Marilyn, I'm trying to kind of show everyone AirWatch. So if depending on the question, I'll be able to answer. Otherwise, I might have to ask that you contact the client service desk. Anyways, Nicole, just so you see here that your iPad is currently in TDSB Prod, so it's not in your school. So I'm going to go ahead and move this over after the webinar. But that's the reason why you see the agent app, but it doesn't have any restrictions on it, and you don't see it in your list. So getting back to here, like I said, we do want to rename our iPads in a way that is meaningful to us. So for example, you probably have a list of iPads here that just have the default name iPad. If you wish to rename it, there's two ways you can go about doing that. You can either on the device side, go into, let me show you. So on the iPad itself, you can rename it, and this is how I would recommend that you rename it, is you would go into settings. Let me leave settings so you can see me actually do that. So to rename your iPad, you go into settings, and then general on the left hand side, and then about, and we can see that this is robotics iPad number 1. So under the name field, under settings, general, and about, has the name of the iPad. If I change the iPad name here, it will change on AirWatch. And this is probably the best way to rename it, because A, you're holding it in your hand. So let's say you now want to rename all your iPads. You pick up your iPad, make sure it's got a label on the back. Obviously, we're not using our client service desk labeling convention here, but we did label our iPads. Then you would take a look at the label, flip the iPad back around, go into settings, general, and about, and change the name to whatever it is uniquely identified as with your label, and maybe even the purpose. So if it was called iPad number 1, but I know it's only going to be used for robotics, that's why I would call it robotics iPad number 1. And then once that's changed here under settings, general, and about, give or take about 5 to 10 minutes, what will happen is the name will then show here in AirWatch. You can also from AirWatch rename the iPad. This is probably the least recommended way. So for example, let's say I want to rename robotics iPad number 1, and let's say I want to rename it to something else. Obviously, I can do that from the AirWatch console, but if the iPad is not named robotics iPad number 1, and it's still named the default iPad, I have no way of knowing that that iPad is the iPad that I'm trying to rename. So if I do know, though, that that iPad is the one that I'm trying to rename, despite the fact that it would only be named iPad, I can still rename it from here. So I can change it by clicking the pencil icon next to the iPad. It'll ask me for the name that I'm going to give it. In this case, Robotics iPad number 1. Let's say that this is now Robotics iPad number 25. I can then set the friendly name as the device name. This will take the name that I've set here and push it over to the iPad such that it shows in settings. And then once I click save, that name should make its way over there. I can still do that now. I was told by my tech who was here that I might not be able to do it if I left it. A few iPads which were put into AirWatch after the original set, I didn't name them right away. Can I still do that now? Yes, yeah. Yeah, you can always rename your iPads. Yeah. So that's actually what I'm doing right now. So so for example, I can pick up. In fact, I have an iPad that I just wiped, and I'm gonna put it into AirWatch to show you. But in fact, let me do that now because it will make more sense with. Oh wait, here it is. It will make more sense with renaming. So let's imagine I am Marilyn, and I have a new iPad here. It's brand new out of the box. Let me see if I can get the. Hold on, this is causing the white balance to go out of whack. Move that out of there. Okay, so it's kind of dim, and I'm sorry, I can't change the brightness during the initial setup. But let's pretend that this iPad that I have here is brand new, and this is the first time I am setting it up. During the initial setup, it will, that is really dark. Let me see if I can turn on the light. Did that help? Kinda? Alright. I think that's as good as it's going to get. So I have a brand new iPad here. And I'm going to go through the initial setup. It asks you some basic questions like choose your language, English, country, Canada. During the choose your Wi-Fi network, you can join TDSB-Wi-Fi just for the setup purpose. So you're going to join TDSB Wi-Fi just for this initial setup. It's going to ask us for our username, so we enter in our employee number, and then we enter in our password. Let me take that off the screen so you don't see that. Okay, so I have my iPad here, cancel, and I do join. It's going to ask me to trust this TDSB wireless certificate. You just click trust in the top right-hand corner there. And assuming I typed in my password correctly, it should then join the wireless network and then proceed with the setup. I did mention at the beginning here that our wireless and network is really slow today because of the conference that seems to be going on in our building. Come on. I don't know what's happening. Let me join TDSB media devices. It'll be quicker. So usually this step is when we join the Wi-Fi. There we go. So I joined TDSB media devices. You may be able to join TDSB media devices on your iPad, but the more reliable one would be TDSB Wi-Fi. So again, this is a brand new iPad, and I'm doing the first time setup. It asked me to choose my language, the country, and the Wi-Fi. It's now going to say that the Toronto District School Board will now automatically configure your iPad. This is where the magic happens of AirWatch. When I click next, it's going to ask me for a username and password. Now in the case of Betty, where she said, I have an iPad in my hand. I know it's an AirWatch because it has a blue background and the agent app and the catalog, yet I don't see it in my list in AirWatch. I don't see it here. You know? And she doesn't see it there because during this step, this is what tells AirWatch where to put the iPad during this username and password phase. And here's where you're going to enter in your school's 4-digit Trillium number. Yeah, it should tell you. Does it? It doesn't for me. Oh yeah. Oh, it says enter the Trillium ID, but it doesn't tell you what your Trillium ID is. Yeah. I'm hoping you guys would know what your school's Trillium ID is. If not, you can ask your OA or your principal. Basically, every school has a unique 4-digit number that kind of says what your school is. Yeah, or for example, when you go to print something, all the printers are named like 1, 2, 3, 4, class 55, right? So that first 4-digit 1, 2, 3, 4 is your unique school number. In the case of my test environment, my number is 9999, so I'm going to enter in 9999 for the username, and also for the password. So the password is also the 4-digit trillium number. So once again, in the password field, 9999. Okay? So I got 9999 in for the username, 9999 for the password, and now I click next at the top here. So that is the most important part of the initial setup. That's what tells AirWatch what to do with this iPad. Because I entered in 9999, it now knows it's got to go into the 999 school. I click get started, and right away what will happen is, well, I shouldn't say right away, but what's going to happen is as this thing is initializing in the background, it's going to start downloading apps. It's going to change the wireless network. The background's going to go blue, and it's so you can see the App Store just disappeared. Eventually the background's going to go blue, and then what'll also happen is we'll get all the apps that we've previously created for AirWatch. And this is sort of what, again, where, there you go, the background's now blue. This is where AirWatch helps with scaling upwards. So if you guys get, for example, 20 new iPads, rather than going in and setting up each one, just that initial setup that I've just done here, it's then going to get all the apps that I've previously configured for it. So you might get some prompts here. It says it's going to edit the home screen. That's fine. Let me just dismiss that. And you can see it's already downloading the agent app there. And then it's going to start downloading the Google Apps Suite, which I've said all the iPads should get. So, getting new iPads is really simple when you have AirWatch. It's easy to redeploy it. And let's say, I wanted this iPad, to go to the robotics group. Now that I have it in AirWatch, I can then move it over to the robotics group, and it'll get all the robotics apps. So using this iPad as an example, I'm going to move forward. So this is my new iPad. I just put it in there, and in fact, when I go back into AirWatch, I should see that there's now a new iPad in here that doesn't look like the others. And there it is. So we got an iPad right here at the top with a bunch of gobbledygook as the name. Okay? So this iPad just joined AirWatch, and for you, it might not have the gobbledygook where it's, mine's kind of long, and I think that's something weird with my environment. But for you, what you're going to see is it's just going to be called iPad. So it's not going to have any name at all. It's just going to be called iPad. So, now I'm looking at the iPad, and it's like, okay, what iPad is this when I'm looking at the list? Well, that's where the renaming comes in handy. So I would look at the back. Okay, it's called iPad number 1. And let's say this is now robotics. I can come into settings, general. Oops. Sorry, give me 1 second. Screen's bugging out. Robotics iPad number 1. Okay. So settings and then general. Oh, sorry, the screen's still. Let me turn. I can fix it now that we're signed in. Let me lamp. I'm going to turn the brightness up, turn that light off. Here, there we go. Boom. Okay. So we have an iPad here. It just joined AirWatch. We now want to give it a friendly name. Settings, general, and then about. And you can see the name is already there. But obviously that means nothing to us because we now want to call it whatever's on the back. So we'll call this, obviously I'm not going to call it CSD. So let's call this robotics. iPad, what did we say, number 1? Sure, number 1. Oops. Robotics iPad number 1. So I'm going to rename it on the device itself under settings, general, and about. I go back, and then what should happen is in AirWatch, I should see that name has now taken effect. So I've renamed it on the device side, and then when I switch back to AirWatch, let me pop back in here. Yeah, I should warn you that it does take some time for that name to take effect. Oh, it actually is right there. So sometimes it can take a few minutes, but for me, it seems to have gone right away. So now I know that robotics iPad number 1 is the one that I was just working with. That iPad there is this iPad here. Robotics iPad 1, robotics iPad 1. I don't know if you can see it there at the top. Yeah. Okay, so that's step 1. We get all our iPads in here, and then we rename them. So now we have a base to work with. We have something we can work with. We can now have our iPads grouped. We have some robotics iPads. We have a grade 4 one and one in the library. So now that we have them named, we can now go ahead and create our groups. And naturally, we're going to probably create a robotics group, right? So I'm going to go over to groups and settings on the left-hand side here. You see my cursor, and we're going to click there, and then we're going to go to groups. and then assignment groups. And in here is where I'll create all my groups. Now I have some previously created before. I should have deleted that. That's one I was going to create is robotics. Let's pretend this one doesn't exist. I'm going to create a new group called robotics new. So it's the new robotics app. But here are all my groups that I've previously created. So you can imagine all my grade 1 iPads would be in grade 1, and grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, so on and so forth. Every school has a default group that we've created for you, and that is called the iPads All Group and the Android All Group. So by default, that iPads All Group actually contains all the iPads by default. So for example, if you wanted to deploy an app to all your iPads, you would use that group because it contains all your iPads in it already. Why do some of the iPads have my name in the list view? So Wanda, if you sign into the, does it change the name? I don't think it changes the name. Yeah, okay. So Wanda, let's say robotics iPad number 1, does it change the name here, or does it show you over here under user your name? So let me see if I can scroll over. So if it says your user, that means you signed into the agent. It shouldn't change your name though, unless you had it plugged into a computer with iTunes. I think iTunes automatically, if you plug it into a computer with iTunes, it's whoever's logged in and launching iTunes, it will change the iPad name to that username. So it'll probably have like your employee number. It'll say like your employee number *S is iPad. That's probably, it's either that or you signed into the iPad and it shows under the user. Okay, so yeah, if it shows under user, then that it just shows you that you logged into the agent. So that'll actually be good in helping you identify that that agent or that iPad's still signed in. So for example, if I go back to my iPad here and I press the home button, and like I showed you again, if I want to remove any restrictions on this iPad, you can see actually right now it's getting some apps. But let's say I launch the agent app and I enter my employee number and password here. It'll then change the user account column there. And it'll automatically change back after you sign out. So it's probably because when we were showing that, you signed into the AirWatch agent for that. But whatever you sign in with here, let me just do that real quick. 3809. Okay. So I'm signing into the AirWatch agent, and then what should happen is once it goes through, is I'll see that on AirWatch that under user, so there we go, success. So now I'm signed into the AirWatch agent. If I toggle back over to AirWatch and I refresh my list here, that robotics iPad number 1 should show under user my name after I refresh. Let's try this. There we go. So see that, robotics iPad number 1, and there I am, Brandon 163809. So, and of course, to get all that means is that you signed in, and in fact, it's probably a good indicator if you forgot to sign out. Then you would know, hey, I forgot to sign out on that one, and hopefully a student doesn't tamper with it. So if I'm back here, if I just want to correct that and sign out again, I just tap log out and then yes. And then once I'm signed out of the agent, then I go back here, and this should show back again as 9999 or whatever. I hope that makes sense. So going back to groups. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked. Groups, and then assignment groups. And now we have a list of our groups. As I said, we have the iPads All group that's there by default. With that iPads All group, you can automatically, it already contains all your iPads by default. So anything you apply to that group will apply to all iPads. But I'm going to create one just for my robotics iPads. I'm going to click Add Smart Group. It's going to come up with this list. First thing you do when you see this screen, unfortunately, we have no way of making this happen by default, but we want to change from select criteria. Up here at the top it says choose type. We want to go from select criteria to select devices or users. And the reason for that is select criteria, what it does is it makes groups based on conditions. So, I right now have all my iPads named robotics iPad 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's how I want my group to be formulated based on, how I've named it. Here it's based on conditions, so it'll be like, what is the model of the iPad? So I could say this group will automatically contain all iPads running version 3.1, etc., etc. We don't want to mess around with this. So whenever you first come into the Add Smart Group window, we change from select criteria up here at the top to select devices or users. It's going to say, hey, you're going to lose all your changes. That's totally fine because I don't want to use it anyway, so I'm going to click OK. Once I'm on select devices or users, now we're ready to create our group. So the reason is we go to select devices users, now I can manually choose my iPads. So when I put my cursor in here, in this enter friendly device name, it'll show me a list of all my iPads. Now, this is why it's important to rename your iPads. Because if you got here, what'll happen is all your iPads would still be named the default. It would say iPad, 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 and you would have no idea which one is which and which one belongs in this new group that I'm creating. In this case, I've already did my due diligence and I've renamed them. So now I know when I'm looking at this list, well, if I'm making a group for my robotics iPads, I'm going to use the ones that are named robotics, right? So let's do that now. So I'm going to choose robotics iPad number 1, and I'm going to click add, and it's going to move it over to the right. So now I got 1 in there. Let's find robotics iPad number 2 and add that in. You can actually type in here too to make it easier. So I can do robotics, and then it'll filter down that list, right? So now I go to number 25. I don't know why I jumped the number like that. And then robotics iPad number 3. So I have all 4 of my robotics iPads in this group now. And I was able to do that effectively because I renamed them. And now I'm going to set the name for the group. And we changed the name of the group in the top right-hand corner here. So I'm going to call this Robotics New. And the reason I'm saying new is because I already have a group called Robotics from my last webinar. So I'm going to call this Robotics New. So here's my new group. It's Robotics New, and it's got all 4 of my robotics iPads in there. Once I click Save, I now have my iPads logically grouped. Huzzah! So if I scroll down here, there's my new group, Robotics New. And if I scroll to the right, it'll say you have, under this devices column here, it'll say, oh, there's 4 devices in here. And of course, let's say I get a new robotics iPad tomorrow, and I didn't add it in. Tomorrow I get a new one. I can easily just go ahead and add it in. I come back into groups, click the group name, and then I find another app, iPad, and just move it in. So I can keep adding to my list of robotics iPads. If you wish to take it out of the group, you can uncheck the name. So I just added library accidentally, and I'm going to uncheck it so that it takes it out of the group. So that's how you would add it. Let's say you got a new one tomorrow. You can come back in here and just add it in. I'm going to cancel out of that. I don't want to make my changes. I don't have iPads listed under devices. Okay, Wanda, so if you don't have any devices listed under devices, then that means that they were not enrolled correctly. So I don't know if you saw earlier, during that initial setup screen, where it asked me for, language, country, I have 81 enrolled but none listed.
Just tell her to click the list view.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So maybe you're on this. So Wanda, on the left-hand side, you click devices and then list view, right? And you should see a list here. If you still don't see anything here, the other thing that might happen is you might have something in the search field up here. So if I try to search for something in the top right-hand corner that doesn't exist, like I have robotics iPads grade 4 and library. Let's say I'm searching for, I don't know, grade 40. It doesn't exist, right? There's no grade 40. So if I search for grade 40, it's going to say I got nothing here. So it looks like I have no iPads, but what it's actually doing is saying, hey, you have not, you tried to search for something up here, and we don't have anything that's named that. And this search feature is good. So if I wanted to find my robotics iPads, I can search robotic, and then it'll show me all my robotics iPads, right? So that might be one reason why it's not showing. The second reason why I think you might not have it listed is you might have a filter in place. So if you see here where it says filters, if I expand this, you might see that there's an extra menu here. And this filters is sort of like the search where, the search I search by the name or some details about the iPad. But the filter is more applies to, yes, I have them in the list view, but not in the assignment groups. I have them in the list. Oh, see, she has them here, but does not have. So if you go to groups, groups, assignment groups. Okay, so this, Wanda, I think I know. So like I said, when you go to add smart group, you go instead of, at the top here, it says select criteria. We toggle over to select devices or users, right? Once they're on select devices or users, why is that not clicking? Oh yeah, let me cancel that. Web applications. So select devices or users. Huh? Hang on. What's going on? Is this what you were experiencing, Wanda? Are you not able to click that? Because I suddenly am unable to click that. Let me refresh the page. It is a web application, so these kind of things do happen. So again, add smart group. And okay. Okay, so once you're on select devices or users, it'll say, are you sure? You click OK. And then here is where we pull down our names. If you don't see them here, please let me know, because then that's a problem. Because if you don't see them here, but you also still actually see them here under list view, then that doesn't make sense. And we'll have to, I'm going to park that aside though, just because I want to keep going with the webinar. So let me just, where we left off is we were back here under our smart groups. I just created robotics new, and I can add new iPads in there by clicking it and adding in a new iPad, etc., right? So now that I have my iPads group, let's go ahead and deploy an app. And how we deploy an app is we get out of groups and go to apps and books. We'll have to take a look at that, Wanda. I'm not sure why that is. So we go to apps and books, and then when we're on apps and books, it'll first take us to this default screen here. In the top right-hand corner, it'll say search list. And here, under the search list, we have to enter in our school's 4-digit trillium number again. Because under apps and books, it's going to show us like a bunch of apps that we don't have access to. So these are all, this is like a board-wide look of all the apps that we have. So ABC writing game, blah, 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 for example, I can't use this app. This is just, somebody else may have requested it, and it's just listed here. So what we do is we search for our school's 4-digit trillium number or our school name to filter this giant list of, what does it say, 508, down from 508 to just what our school can use. In this case, my school's 4-digit trillium number is, like I said earlier, 9999. Yours will be different. Yours could be 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. You put it in the search list field in the top right-hand corner here, and then we hit enter. And what will happen is it'll take that giant list of apps and filter it down to the ones that I have here. So now that list is all filtered down. These are my apps. These are the ones that I can use, and these are the ones that I can deploy. Now you're probably asking, well, how did these get here? Why is it that you're able to use these apps and not every single one from the App Store? So AirWatch works a little bit differently. You can pick up the iPad and go to the App Store and find an app that you want. With AirWatch, we have to submit our apps to the app request form. So we basically ask that you guys curate a list of apps that you guys intend to use for your curriculum and submit the app request form such that we can put it in here. Once it's in AirWatch, then you can deploy it. And that app request form process is actually on our knowledge base, our public knowledge base here. Actually, I guess I should show you how to get here. So you can get to our public knowledge base under serviceit.tdsb.on.ca. So service IT is our everything tech page, and our knowledge base is under, I believe, request a service. I wish it was on the home page. I don't know why they've put it here, and it drives me nuts. So once you're on request a service, you click knowledge base, and this will take you to like everything that we have regarding, help. What's that?
I've been linking it throughout.
Oh, you've been linking. Yeah, and also if you look in the chat, Felipe's been putting the links in there as well. So in the case of the app request form to get it in there, it's under mobile devices, and then it's under AirWatch. Where is that? Mobile device management, AirWatch. And then here's like our everything AirWatch help guide. So everything that I'm covering today is actually here. So if you ever need to come back and watch it, it's all here. Also, it's got a link to our webinars as well, so you can come back and watch this one. Adobe Flash Player. Yeah, Nicole, there's no Adobe Flash Player on mobile devices, particularly not iPads either. So everything's going the route of HTML5. Adobe Flash Player, I think, hasn't been on even like Android for years now. Yeah, you're not gonna find any app for Adobe Flash Player, and if you see one in the App Store, it is a lie. Adobe Flash Player is not supported on any of the mobile devices, and they're trying to phase out Adobe Flash for all HTML5 content. So, nonetheless, back here on the screen, this is my everything AirWatch help page. So now the reason I brought you here is I was like, hey, why are all these apps here and not everything from the App Store? So I came in here and I punched in my 4-digit trillion number here in the top right hand corner. It shows me all my apps. Now when I go back over here, I'm going to submit the app request form. It's under right here, app request form. And basically here we'll provide instructions on how to go about getting the apps that you want. It basically just tells you to find the app that you want in the volume purchase program store and then plug it into the list. So if you look at this form, it's pretty straightforward. It basically just says, you know, yeah, I know. I'm sorry we're running out of time. I apologize, guys. If you do need to go, please feel free to. Hopefully you can stay for just a few more minutes so I can show you how to deploy an app. So real quick, like I said, the apps get into there from the app request form, which is filled out here. Okay, so that's how you get your apps. But more importantly, now let's deploy an app. So I have now filtered down my list of apps by using 9999 in the top right hand corner. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a random app and I'm going to push it out to my iPad. So the one that I'm going to choose is Scratch Junior. So Scratch Junior is going to go to my robotics iPad. So again, I search 999 in the top right hand corner. I now see Scratch Junior. I click the app name. What it's going to do is it's going to give me the option to save and assign. So I click save and assign down here. And then I'm going to go add assignment. And then this screen is going to come up here. And what I do is I hover my mouse over add assignment by. I click license code by smart group. And then what I can do here is I put my cursor in this field and it will let me choose from my groups. So thank God I grouped my iPads, because now I know Scratch Junior, well, I want that on my robotics group. So I just scroll down to this list and I should see robotics apps. There it is. Oh, no, I called it robotics new. My apologies. Let me change that to robotics new. There it is. So robotics new, it'll show me that I have 4 devices in that group. That makes sense to me. And then now this allocated value here is set to 0. What I have to do is, even though the app is free, we have a license count for the app. So with these iPads, we give free 500 licenses. So if you request a free app, even though it is free, there's still technically 500 licenses that we say you can use. So even though the app's free, we still have to be accountable for the amount of use we use of an app. The political reasons behind that, I'm not too sure. But nonetheless, the idea here is that I take from my pool of 500 and I allocate it to my group. So obviously I have 4 iPads in my robotics group. I need to give my group 4 licenses or more. If I give it 3, that's not going to work because I have 4 devices. I can't give 3 licenses to 4 iPads. So I give it either 4 or more, right? What we recommend is that you go shoot for the moon, go a little bit higher than what you currently have in there. Because again, if tomorrow I get 20 more robotics iPads, I don't want to come back in here and change that value every time I get a new iPad. So I'm going to shoot for the moon. Because I have 500 licenses to play with, I'm going to say that this group can use up to 50 licenses. So I don't imagine I'm going to get 50 robotics iPads anytime soon. So let's just shoot for the moon and do 50 allocated values there. And I would recommend you do the same for you guys as well too. Everything else we're going to leave default. So I chose my group. I gave it 50 licenses. The assignment type here is auto, is what's going to tell this iPad it's going to get it right away. So when I hit save, it's going to say, here's your new assignment. Totally fine. I'm going to click save and publish. It's going to then tell me all the iPads that are going to get it. So I can see that these are the exact 4 robotics iPads that I wanted to get it. I click publish, and then the magic starts happening. So what should happen now is the app should start making its way over to the iPad, network connection permitting. So here's one of the iPads I just enrolled. Again, it might not appear here right away. In this case, it doesn't look like it has. Let me pull up my other one. Let's see if it's got it. So neither of my iPads have it yet, although I imagine they will get it soon. Unfortunately, just because of the time, I know you guys need to get back to class. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep going through this webinar. I apologize. This thing always goes over. I don't know how to crunch it down into an hour that they want us to do. It's not possible. And we've tried so many times. And if you look at all our video history, you'll see that they always go over because it is a complex system. But maybe we should have been honest and just said like an hour and a half or 2 hours, something like that. And then the idea here though is that you've got the gist of it. So you have your iPads, you know about the agent app and the catalog. You can sign into the AirWatch agent to unlock restrictions. You can group your iPads under groups and settings, and then you can go to apps and books and then deploy your apps from here. I'm going to keep talking. If you do need to go, feel free to. I apologize for going over. But what will happen is if later you want to catch up and see what you missed because you had to go, again, this same link that you're watching me on is the one you can use to go back and watch this webinar again. So I'm going to carry on as if you guys never left. And then if you have to leave now, just come back and watch the rest of it later. There shouldn't be much more than that. So you can, watch it at home. It's going to be entertaining, hopefully. Again, so it's just get the YouTube link up here at the top. Let me pull it down so you can see. So just maybe email yourself this link here. So here's the YouTube channel that we're on right now. If you just copy this link up here at the top. In fact, actually, we sent it to you in an email, so you can just use that email and click the link here. If you come back and watch it, it'll basically be this whole recording, and you can just jump ahead to where we left off. We're probably an hour in, so yeah, that's what I would recommend. But I'm going to carry on as if nothing happened, or as if you guys are all still here. So with that, let's move on. Again, so I'm looking at my apps here. So I have a list of my apps, and again, I clicked which one did I just deploy? I deployed Scratch Junior. So just to recap, I go to apps and books, right? And then I search my school's 4-digit trillion number in the top right-hand corner. I don't necessarily have to type in the trillion number either. It's 9999, but I can also type in just my school name. I can type in Maple Grove, and obviously Maple Grove isn't a real school, but I can search by the name as well. So Maple Grove, and I hit enter, and it will return the same list. So now I'm looking at all my apps once again. One thing I want you to be cognizant of is once you're in here, you'll see a list of all the apps that you've requested. If I've allocated the exact I need, can I go back and increase it, or do I have to delete this out? No, Kim, you can actually go back and increase it. So for example, with Scratch Junior, I had just given it 50 licenses, right? And then I just talked to somebody and they said, oh no, we're getting 100 more. So now I need to go back and change it. So what I'm going to do is I go back into the app, and again, it's kind of a pain. But once you have this initial deployment part out of the way, it makes your life easier going forward. So I go into Scratch Junior, because that's where I know the app is, and I go to Save and Assign. And then my previous rule that I just created should be here. So it says Robotics New. I could select it and delete it and create a new one, or I can click Edit. And if I click Edit, it'll just bring up the screen that I had before. So whereas I set 50, I'm just going to change that now to 100. So that update the license count there. And I click Save. So the rules should be in there. Now if I go back and edit it again, I should see that it shows 100. 100, yeah. So yeah, if you suddenly need to go back and change it, you're unfortunately going to have to do that for each individual app. So yeah, that's why we recommend not doing it an explicit, like, if you have a certain amount of devices in your group, try to go a bit above, because you want to accommodate for future growth, or not even necessarily growth. Like you may not even be getting new iPads, but you might move them around, right? So your grade 1 iPad suddenly, you realize, okay, well, we're gonna steal 3 from that program and put it into robotics. Well, if I went through all my apps here and gave my robotics group 4 licenses each, and now I have 3 more, I need to go back in and update the license count for every single app, and it's fairly annoying. So that was the deploying of Scratch Junior. I just want to show you that I'm not a liar. I'm going to toggle back to my iPad, and you can see here that Scratch Junior has now made its way over to my robotics iPad, and this one as well. So they both got Scratch Junior. Okay. No worries, Kim. Where was I? Okay, so now I'm looking at a list of my apps. The one more thing I want you to be cognizant of is if you just requested a new app, sometimes what you might see is a big blue button that says Enable Device Assignment. If you see that, you need to press it, and I always have to do this spiel because I don't know why they just didn't make it part of the process. But let's say it's part of the process now. Are you sure? I saw it the other day.
Part of the process, but sometimes they forget.
So if I see it, I should tell them? Okay. Basically, I'll show you an example. But the case of Epic. So let's say I just submitted the app request form here. I filled in on my name, my principal's name, the school, and then I said I want the app Epic, right? And I hit submit. Then I get notified, hey, you're ready. Your app Epic is now ready, right? I come into AirWatch, I click apps and books, I go to the native, I click apps and books, it takes me here. I search my school name in the top right hand corner, and now I see my app Epic is now available for use and deployment. Sometimes what they do is if I click the app name and I see this big blue button here, it says enable device assignment, you have to press that. If you don't press it, it causes some weird problems on the iPad. Yeah, it doesn't assign it, so you actually won't even get the app. It's the silliest thing, and I think what we did is before they weren't making it part of their process to put those apps in there, but now you shouldn't see this anymore, ideally. But just a heads up, if you do, press the button, it'll say, "Are you sure?" We click OK, and then you'll never see it again. So I'm going to leave that there for in case I have to show it for future examples. I purchased an app, but I don't see it on my list in AirWatch. Portia, was that app purchased prior to AirWatch, or was it purchased recently? Because let's say you want to purchase an app now, right? Like let's say I want to find an app. We'll go back to our app request form process. It says go find the app. So we come into here, which actually doesn't work in Google Chrome because Apple App Store broke it. Sorry. I could talk all day about this because one question always leads to like 100 other ones. So let's go back here. So what the app request form says you do is you go find the app that you want. So let's say, what's a paid app? What's a paid app that people like? Before? Yeah. So hold on. I purchased that, but I don't see my list of AirWatch. So if you bought it before AirWatch, what'll happen is that they create these, they create smart groups for apps that were previously purchased. So if I go to groups and settings and groups, what you may see is that they have an app, a smart group name that is named after an app. So I actually created one here as an example. It's not real, but let's say prior to AirWatch, I bought this app 3 years ago, and now we're on AirWatch, and it's like, well, wait a minute, I bought that app, but it's not showing up in AirWatch. What they did is because of some compatibility reasons, they, when you bought it, it was part of your Apple ID. In order to migrate it over to AirWatch, it's just deployed a different way. So here's an example. Let's say I have this app called Monkey Math. What you should see is there's a group under groups and settings is one of the groups is going to be called the name of the app, in this case Monkey Math, and then there should be a license count in the title of the group name. So this should tell me that I have Monkey Math with 20 licenses. So let's say I bought Monkey Math 3 years ago, before AirWatch was even an idea. What I should see is Monkey Math as a group, and if I want an iPad to get the Monkey Math app, I have to add that iPad to the group. So if I want Robotics iPad number 1 to have it, I add it in. If I want Robotics iPad number 2 to have it, I add it in. And then I click Save. And just by adding it to the group, it should get that app. That's unfortunately the only way that we could get these previously purchased apps to work in AirWatch. So you're not going to see it here like you would see with a new apps going forward. Yeah. One's based off an Apple ID and one's purchased through the volume purchase program. It doesn't matter. The finer details of it don't matter, but the idea is the same. So let's say tomorrow, if I order a new app and it costs money, it's going to appear here just like we do with every other app. But if that app, I bought it 3 years ago, in order to migrate it over, they created a group for that app. So yeah, okay. So Portia, if you don't see the app that you know you guys have purchased, submit a ticket. In fact, just can you just put her name aside? Yeah. So I'm gonna reach out to you via email, and we're gonna see what's going on with that app, and we're gonna investigate it because all your previously purchased apps are tied to the Apple ID. We still have access to look at those and see what those are, and then we can get that group created for you. So we'll take that offline. It was a volume purchase. Yeah. Okay. In any case, we have to investigate that if you purchase it, if it's not there. If you don't see it here or in the groups, then somebody didn't do something somewhere. All right, so back to where I was. So I just deployed Scratch Junior. Let me show you one more time just for consistency. Let's say I want to deploy Seesaw now. I can click again. Once again, I click the app name. I go to Save and Assign. I go to Add Assignment. I go to License Code by a Smart Group. I choose my Smart Group. in this case, the robotics iPads group, robotics new. I note that I have 4 devices in here, and I want to shoot for the moon so that if I get 50 more tomorrow, it's not a problem. And then the assignment type is set to auto. And again, when I set the assignment type to auto, which it is by default, it will automatically push out that that app to my iPad so that they appear as soon as possible. So what will eventually happen is I'll see that app will appear here on both these iPads. Again, it's all network permitting, so probably I'll check back on it. Yeah. Prolo Quota Go. Yeah, that's an expensive one. That's like $300, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, so now I want to show you how to deploy that app using on demand. So another thing that you can do is rather than forcing an app to make its way to the iPad automatically, you can choose to do on demand. And what that does is it puts in the catalog. Now I briefly mentioned the catalog at the beginning, and here's where it comes into play. Let's say I want to deploy Google Translate, but I don't want to force it to all my iPads. I just want it to show, I want it to be optional so that whoever has the iPad in their hand, let's say the teachers, and they want to use Google Translate, then I can allow them to do that optionally. So I'm going to deploy Google Translate much the same that I did the previous ones, except for one little change, which you're going to see in just a second. If I click Google Translate, it's going to come up with this new window. Again, I check for that big blue button. It's not there. I can move on. So I click Save and Assign. Then I go here. It's going to say Add Assignment. We're going to choose the license code by Smart Group. We find our group. In this case, instead of using the robotics group, I'm going to use the iPads all group. So you can see in my iPads all group, I have 7 devices. So my robotics group has 4. All of my iPads, again, this iPads all group contains all your iPads. So in total, I have 7 iPads for my fictitious school. I'm going to choose 7 licenses for those 7 devices, so I can either do 7 or more. Again, always shoot for the moon. So even though I have 7 iPads in total, I may get 100 more down the road. I'm going to choose 150. Why not? So I've allocated 150 for 7 devices. But now in this assignment type field, before I had chosen auto, which is going to say, let's push that app right away. If I choose on demand, what it'll do is it makes it optional for the iPad. And I'll show you what I mean. So I've changed it to on demand. I'm going to click save and then save and publish. It's going to say again, hey, these are all the iPads that are going to get it. And it's going to show me all of them because I deployed it to the iPads all group. Totally fine. But it's a little bit misleading because it's not going to push it out to the iPads. They're not going to, like, that app's not going to appear on my iPads. But what it's going to do is it's going to make it an option in the catalog. So taking a look at this iPad, it looks like it's downloading Seesaw right now. That is not the app that I just pushed out. The app that I just pushed, which app did I just push out? Oh, geez, I didn't remember. Was it Twitter? So Seesaw, let me go back. Save and assign. So this one, I said auto. Okay, so Seesaw is deploying automatically. So that's why Seesaw is on here. I forced it to the iPad, right? Seesaw's installing there, and it's already installed here. But I set one of the apps as on demand. I just already blanked out and forgot which one it was. Was it Twitter? Were you paying attention?
No, I was checking.
Oh, buddy. Let me go to Twitter. I think it was Twitter. No, it was Google Translate. Ah, okay. I mean, Twitter's one of them anyways. So, yeah, it was Google Translate. Okay, so Google Translate, where is it? So Google Translate, here. So I came in here, I added the assignment, but this time I chose on demand, right? So let me go back in here and edit this. So I chose my iPads all group, so all my iPads, 150 licenses, and I set the assignment type to on demand. So what that means is when I go back to my iPad, it's not going to push Google Translate, but if I go to the catalog up here in the top right hand corner, I'm going to see a list of all my apps, and including the optional ones. And Google Translate is one of the optional ones. I've previously created other optional apps, so I can optionally install Twitter or Google Translate. And as you can see, it didn't force it to this iPad. It's not going to install on its own. But what I'm saying is that the person who has it in their hand has the option to install it. So let's say I now want Google Translate. I can install. And what will happen is that app should then install in the background. Sometimes it's a real pain. Let me see. Oh, it didn't take it. Install processing says your request install was received. And I should see, there it goes. Okay. So right here you can see Google Translate is now downloading. And that only kicked off because I chose to do it manually. Or I went to the catalog to install it. So that catalog, so that's what on demand is. When I choose on demand here, on demand puts it in the catalog here. I hope that makes sense. That's on demand. So we have two ways of pushing out our apps. We did auto and on demand. On demand makes it optional. Auto forces it to all the iPads. Let's say I want to undo what I've done. I made a mistake. I don't want Scratch Junior anymore. We realize that that app is not what we need for our curriculum. So let's scroll back down. We're going to find Scratch Junior one more time. To remove an app, all we do is undo what we just did. So we have all our iPads grouped. We took the app and we applied it to that group such that all of them get that app. To reverse that process, if I want to remove Scratch Junior from all those iPads, I just come back in here. I go to Save and Assign. There's my assignment rule. I can select that rule and delete. Goodbye. So now, by removing that assignment rule, I'm saying I no longer want Scratch Junior on my robotics iPads. I go to Save and Publish. It's going to tell me, hey, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to remove it from these 4 iPads. Is that what you want to do? I sure do. I click Publish. And when I toggle back over to my iPads, Scratch Junior is gone. Let's see if it's gone from, oh, this one's running out of battery. That's fine. And Scratch Junior is gone. Okay? So I undid that, right? That's how I would do it en masse. So that's me taking the app and removing it from several iPads at a time. You can, of course, if you want to remove it from just one that's in that group, there's other ways of doing that. So let's deploy Scratch Junior again. I go back into Scratch, Save and Assign, Add Assignment, License Code by Smart Group. You can see how once you get the hang of this, assigning apps isn't even a problem. It's literally a few clicks. So robotics new, there's my group by 4 devices. Let's give it 150 licenses. Assignment type is auto. So now I'm pushing out Scratch Junior again. I'm just putting it back on all my iPads. Publish. Boom. Okay. So Scratch Junior should be making its way back over to my iPads. And when it does, what I can do is, even though I have it set to go to all my robotics iPads, I can choose to remove it from one and not the other. Obviously, that's going to take some time for it to make its way back over to the iPad. So maybe let's not use Scratch Junior as that example. They both have Seesaw on it. Okay. So let's use Seesaw as my example then. So let's say I have Seesaw on both these iPads, right? And I don't want to remove it from all my iPads, but I just want to take it off one particular iPad. So I can go into Seesaw. Oh, sorry, no. Cancel out. So I know the app is Seesaw. Let's say a teacher comes up to me and asks me, hey, you're the AirWatch administrator. I have Seesaw on my iPad. I don't need it on my iPad, but the whole class still needs it, but on my particular iPad, I don't need it. I can show you the auto update in just a second, Kim, because it's actually in the same section of what I'm talking about right now. So let's say I want to remove Seesaw from just one of these iPads, because right now all my robotics iPads have Seesaw. So Seesaw and Seesaw, right there, right? And I want this one to keep Seesaw, but I don't want this one to have it. Okay? So how I can do that is I go back into AirWatch. I select my app name, and I can go to Manage Devices. Right? If I click Manage Devices, it'll bring up a list of all the iPads that currently have it. Right? So now I know, okay, some teacher has just requested that I remove it from her iPad, but I want to keep it in the robotics group. I want to take it off that one specific iPad. I can do that under Manage Devices. So I want to get it off this one, right? So how I would first identify what this one is let's go check the name, Settings, General, About. So this iPad is Robotics iPad number 1. Okay? I want to remove it from Robotics iPad number 1, but I want to keep it on the other one. So I look back at my list here, and I see here Robotics iPad number 1 is listed here. If this list were giant and you had a bunch, you can actually filter this down. So I can do robotics iPad number 1, and it'll search that list. It finds it, right? So that iPad, I want to take it off. So I can select that iPad and go to remove from selected. Okay. So what I've done is that robotics iPad number 1 is still part of the robotics iPad number 1 group. I still have it so that every iPad in the robotics iPad group gets Seesaw. However, this one particular iPad is an exception. I'm going to remove it from just this iPad. So once I've done that, what I should see is it says pending removal. So as soon as it knows that it's gone, it will update that. And then when I go back over to my iPad, so this one keeps it. This one should have it gone. And there it is. It's gone, right? So this one still has it, and this one doesn't have it. Despite the fact that I still have my rule in place that says all robotics iPads will get it, I've made this one the exception by selecting it and going to remove. So that's just one other thing you want to do. So I might have missed this. Everything in my auto update has a red circle. How do I make it green? Okay, so with the auto update, so as you saw with that particular app, when I select it with the check mark, it gives me some extra options. So when I click the name is where I go to create the assignment rules. That's where I go to deploy it. But if I click this check mark, some other features open up here. The ones that you're going to use is that manage devices, which is where I just removed one. But then there's enable auto updates. So if you see this green, sorry, not green, the red X, it means that that app is not set to auto update. What that means is that, how do I explain this? Because, okay, so Seesaw, for example, if I get an app, I was telling you which, oh, thank you, Michelle. Michelle's probably, remember how, Michelle, she's probably got the live button set, not red. That's why it's, because I talked about that a while ago, right? Yeah, okay. So she's probably just fallen out of sync. If you press the live button on your player, you'll be more recent. Michelle, I talked about that a few minutes ago, so you're probably a little bit out of sync. Doesn't matter. Getting back to here, though, with Seesaw, you can see that the app here is not it's not set to auto update. So what that means is if I assign this Seesaw app to a bunch of iPads right now, it's going to get whatever the version is in the App Store, right? But then let's say tomorrow Seesaw releases an update for their app, all your iPads aren't going to automatically update themselves unless we check this off. So we check off, we check off the name of the iPad, or sorry, the name of the app, and then we use the enable auto updates up here. Or if I don't want it to automatically update, I can just use update. So I can say do a one-time update. I want all my iPads that have Seesaw to update now, right? And that's a manual process. So I click it, click update app. It's going to say, you sure? Yes. So now all my iPads know, go get the latest version, right? Or to make my life easier so I don't have to do that every time there's an update, I can check the app name and go to enable auto updates, which means going forward, when there's an update for the app, it's going to automatically update the apps on all your iPads. So if your iPad has it, it's going to have the latest version. It's going to automatically update it. So that's that. Some people may not want to turn on auto updates. Sometimes an update might break a bunch of things. So if you have something that's like pertinent to your curriculum, I've seen instances where the update suddenly stops working on a bunch of iPads. So you may not want the auto update. I personally leave them on because generally speaking, the apps are very immutable. Yeah, so you can see I have auto update turned on all mine except for Epic. But yeah, that's really a call that you have to make, is how if you want to enable auto updates. Just keep in mind though that when an update becomes available, it's not always stable, right? I can make an update for an app and it could cause more problems. Yeah. How would you identify a 32-bit app?
It just doesn't install.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a new iPad.
Yeah.
It's running iOS.
Right.
Whatever.
Mhm.
If you try to install an older update,
Yeah.
it might not install. It won't install.
Yeah.
It'll show up in a query as a 32-bit app.
Hmm. I don't know if I want to explain that because 32-bits is kind of complicated. Okay, it's getting there. So it's 1 o'clock. I think that's pretty much it. So that's how you deploy the apps. I showed you how to rename your iPads, how to group them. So step one, rename all your iPads, right? Get them into your AirWatch environment, rename them so that they make sense to you, and then we put them in groups that make sense to you. Once they're in the groups, then we can take these apps and deploy it. You have two ways of deploying an app. You can either choose on demand or you can choose auto. With auto, it's going to push them out right away. With on demand, it's going to make it optional. Okay? If you wish to undo it, you can delete your assignment rule and then it will pull that app off all the iPads. Or if you want to make an exception and say, I just want to remove it from this one device, you can come in here, check the app name, and go to Manage Devices, and then select it from the list and remove it. I don't expect you guys to remember everything I've said here off by heart. You may need to come back and watch this video again as a reference point. There's still a little bit more cool little features that I didn't really get the opportunity to touch on, but this is what we wanted to cover for the most part. This is where we want to get you guys going, right? We want you guys to have your iPads in a way that you can push out those apps to your iPads so you can get them being used in the classroom. And then anything else that you want to know about AirWatch, more likely if you go back to this this knowledge base, we've done a pretty good job of keeping this up to date and adding in all the features here under AirWatch. So in here it's got some other features. There's a few things I didn't get the chance to show. You can actually, like I said, deploy a web clip. So if you wanted a website like Pebble Go, for example, to show up on all your iPads, you could do that here. And that would all be under the deploying apps and content. Oh, sorry, deploy a web clip. So that's how you deploy like a shortcut. So that's something I didn't get the chance to show. It's pretty similar to deploying an app, but that's the idea, is that you can push out a shortcut or a favorite page. You may want to put your school website. I've seen people use a Google form. So if I want students to fill out a survey, so I can poll my students for information, I could force a web clip with a survey on it. You could force a Google Drive folder. So let's say you have a folder on Google Drive that has a bunch of your school's photos, like you just had an event. You can then make a web clip that points to that URL so that it shows up on all your iPads. So anybody who picks up an iPad can click it, and then they'll see the photos from that day or the photos for your school. A whole bunch of interesting, neat things that you guys can come up with of how you wish to do it. It's more than likely it is possible. You can always call us at the client service desk if you're not sure. Another thing I didn't really get the chance to show is that you can wipe a device from AirWatch. So I briefly mentioned that if you select a device, I could choose to factory wipe it. What else? That's it. Yeah. There's enable loss mode. Oh, we haven't created an article for that yet. That's fine. Enable loss mode. Don't worry about enable loss mode. Okay. That's it. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with if you guys can just get what we've covered here today. Again, check out this KB here, the knowledge base. Again, you go to service IT, and then you should see the knowledge base under service request. I'm going to keep this chat open. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them. I will try to answer them now. If you have to go, please do. Other than that, thank you very much for joining us. And yeah, let us know if you have any questions. You can contact us at the client service desk. Our number is 416-395-4357, and we can log a ticket for you. I'm just going to keep this chat open and the video open for the next few minutes just to see if anyone has any lingering questions. And then from there, we'll wrap it up. Okay, Kim, so if you're back into your apps, let me just see if I can pop in your environment here. You can leave all this stuff set up. I'll stay back here and make sure everything's fine. So let's go, Kim. What school is Kim part of? So let's go into Brock. Schools. Oops. Okay, so let's take a look at the apps here. So let's say you go to apps and books.
No, I would go to devices.
Brock
Right?
is, no, she said she's under managed devices, right? So let's say, so here's a list of your apps, Kim, and let's say you went to a specific app that you wanted to remove. So let's say it was Duolingo. You go to manage devices, and you're saying that some of them don't have it yet. So you clicked that and then went to install, right? Blue Grade 2 Music iPad 1. Yeah, but which app?
No,
Is the app called Blue?
that's a thing though, like, cause like the easiest way is to go to device.
Well, you go to manage
Here you go.
devices.
No, but like she's asking me why
Oh,
it's not installed.
okay. So you go to devices,
Yeah.
list view, and then we
She's
go
asking
to,
why it's not installed, right? So
okay,
if you go to
Blue Grade 2. So it's Coin Toss is the app. So if I go to Blue Grade 2, iPad number 1. Good job on the naming. This is awesome. So this is a model school. So it's running iOS 11.3,
so
11.3.0.
11.3
So
32-bit.
so it's not a 32-bit problem.
It
It's
could no, it could be.
it could be.
The app that they have, not all vendors have all
Oh, okay.
64-bit.
Okay. So here was something that I didn't want to explain in the webinar because it's confusing, but it's possible. The app. So in the newer versions of iOS, in this case 11.3, so you're one version away from the latest. The latest version right now is 11.3.1. In newer versions of iOS, they have apps that are 32-bit. What that means is,
So if you go to if you
yeah,
have
so
to query it,
the app
no, query the device,
query
okay, and then go to more troubleshoot,
more troubleshooting.
you will see on here 32-bit, like it's a 32-bit issue right here.
Yeah, there it is. Look at that. Okay.
So those are
So this is exactly what's going on. Oh, lovely. So, okay. So
there's nothing we can do.
there's nothing that can be done, unfortunately,
We
Kim.
have to wait for the vendor to
The
catch
the
up.
person who the people who made this app, in this case, Coin Toss. Let me see if I can look it up. It probably shows it in the App Store. Coin Toss App Store. Let's take a look. Coin Flip Plus.
Well, don't just. There's nothing we can do. You have to.
Yeah.
The vendor has to catch up and update the app.
So basically, when the app was created, it was a long time ago. So that app that you're using is very old, and the vendor who made the app is did not correctly support the right architecture of all the iPads going forward. So all of our newer iPads are in 64-bit, and this application is a 32-bit app. Apple has removed support for 32-bit apps. We created this article to reflect that. Um, Basically, unfortunately, there's nothing really we can do. The app that you're trying to deploy is too old, and your iPad is too new. So usually, those are the two instances where sometimes you might have a problem with the app. Is sometimes it's your iPad is too old and the app is too new, and it cannot support. It will not run on the older iPad, or vice versa. The app hasn't been updated in forever, and it will not work on newer iPads because Apple has this tendency of they just keep going. They don't slow down. They always come up with updates, and they often depreciate technologies without any regard for, you know, the ongoing nature of it. It's sad, and in fact, I think even with like iTunes, like if you want to wipe a device with iTunes, you have to have the latest version. Apple is very you have to have the latest version, including this. So there, unfortunately, with this particular app, we can see here it shows that the app is trying to install is an unsupported 32-bit application. So if you see that, that's probably why. I would expect that if it doesn't work on this iPad, then all your other iPads that want to install it will not get it. So if I look at your list of iPads here, you can see you have a bunch that are 11.3, right? In fact, I can filter this list down to get a better idea. So if I come in here and I do device type platform, which we know is Apple iOS, and we're going to change the version. So I can look at all my iPads that are running. So you have two types here. You have iPads that are running 11.3, which means they are new. there's a good chance if it's running 11.3, that app is not going to work on it. However, you also have some iPads that are running 9.35. Let me
So those apps.
let me take that out.
That app is gonna work.
Yeah. So on those iPads that are running 9.3, Jesus, stop refreshing. So here we go. So now I filtered down your list. Oh my goodness. Okay. I filtered down your list to show me all iPads that are running 9.3, and now I can see 9.3, 9.3. These iPads shouldn't have a problem running that app. Let's see, library, apps. What was it called? Book flip, flip book, coin toss,
Yeah, see?
coin toss. So you see, coin toss is working on this iPad, and because it's running older software. I hope that makes sense. So the problem with so you have a bunch of iPads that are running 9.35. These iPads are on the maximum latest version possible for the hardware. So these are considered older iPads. Yeah. Yeah, that's what that is. So that's one thing to be cognizant of is the hardware. So even though these are 9.35 and the latest version of iOS is 11.3, there's nothing you can do about this. You can't update them beyond 9.35. That's the milestone that Apple has set for that hardware. I hope that answers your question. I don't see any other question in the chat, Kim, unless you have anything else. No pressure, but it's my lunchtime. Perfect. Thank you so much for attending, guys. If you're still there, thanks again for attending. I hope this answered some of your questions. Feel free to contact us again at the client service desk if you have any further questions, or feel free to watch this video or previous videos on this channel. Our number, once again, is 416-395-4357, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your afternoon. It's nice and lovely and sunny out last I checked. Go enjoy the day. Take care. Bye-bye.